Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you the results of the Israeli elections, an analysis of the choices that Benjamin Netanyahu has to form his next government, and in doing so, it appears that Israel is making a choice for its future, whether it's going to follow the path of secular Zionism or embrace biblical Zionism. Biblical Zionism is embracing the covenant that was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the election results were as follows. The party that received the most votes was the joint list of the party of Benjamin Netanyahu, that is Likud, and he ran in the elections on a joint list with Israel Beitenu. Now this is a Russian immigrant party that's headed by Avigdor Lieberman. They received 31 Knesset seats. Coming in second with 19 Knesset seats is the new political party for this election, who goes by Yesh Atid, which means there's a future, and this is a secular centrist party headed by former Israeli journalist Yair Lapid. Third, with 15 Knesset seats, was Labor. Labor is a socio-economic party who has a new leader for this election, Shelley Yakimovich. Coming in fourth, with 12 Knesset seats, Jewish Home. Jewish Home is a merged party from last elections. It is the merger of the National Religious Party and National Union. It is a nationalistic modern Orthodox party headed by Naftali Bennett. Coming in fifth, with 11 Knesset seats, Shas. This is a Sephardic, meaning those Jews that came from Northern Africa and Spain. They are Sephardic ultra-Orthodox party. Coming in sixth, with 7 Knesset seats, United Torah Judaism. This is an Ashkenazi, meaning those Jews from Eastern Europe. It is an Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox party. Coming in seventh, with 6 Knesset seats, Hatnua, which means the movement. This is a party headed by Tzipi Livni. She was the former leader of Kadima. In her primary political position is she's a strong advocate of peace negotiations with the Palestinians. Tying with Hatnua, also with 6 Knesset seats, is Meretz. Meretz is a far left-wing party. Coming in ninth, with the minimum number of seats permissible in an Israeli election, 2 seats, is the party that got the most votes in the last Israeli election. The party is Kadima. It is now headed by Shaul Mofaz, and its party platform also indicates that it is a strong advocate of peace negotiations with the Palestinians. In Israel, you vote for a political party. You don't vote for a specific candidate. The leader of the political party which receives the most votes gets to form a coalition of parties to establish a government and become prime minister. As a result, Benjamin Netanyahu is in position to remain as prime minister of Israel. In realizing this fact, following the election results, Netanyahu said, "I'm proud to be your prime minister again. I thank you for giving me a chance for the third time to lead the state of Israel. It is a great privilege and a great responsibility." Then he outlined 5 major principles for his next government. Number 1, security, which entails stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Number 2, fiscal responsibility. This entails cuts in government spending due to a large government spending deficit. Number 3, political responsibility. This entails seeking a peace agreement with the Palestinians. Number 4, equal distribution of burden in Israeli society. This is political talk which refers to drafting ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students or those that study Torah full-time into the Israeli military. Number 5, social and economic responsibility. This policy would be cutting the cost of living and housing prices in Israel. Based upon these guidelines, Netanyahu will attempt to form a government. Since there are 120 members in the Israeli Knesset, he needs to have at least 61 members to form a majority government. Ideally, he would like to form a government with about 80 members. This would prevent his government from being toppled if one of the parties in the coalition becomes unhappy with one of the domestic or foreign policy decisions adopted by the government. While this may be Netanyahu's goal, because of the competing political interests of the various elected parties, this goal would not likely be achievable. It would seem that Netanyahu has three viable options to form a government. Number one, he could establish a right-wing government. This government would consist of Likud B'Teinu joining Jewish Home, which is the nationalistic modern Orthodox Party, and the two ultra-Orthodox parties, Shas and United Torah Judaism. This would make a government of 61. However, this government could easily be accused of being against the peace process by the international community. It could result in an international economic boycott against Israel for failing to negotiate with the Palestinians. With the ultra-Orthodox parties in the coalition, Netanyahu would not be able to get approval to draft yeshiva students into the Israeli military, as it would, of course, be opposed by the ultra-Orthodox parties. His second option is to form a combination left-right coalition. This coalition would consist of Likud B'Teinu joining the party that received the second most votes, Yesh Atid, which means there's a future, headed by former Israeli journalist Yair Lapid, and Jewish Home, the party headed by Naftali Bennett, the nationalistic modern Orthodox party. This would give Netanyahu a coalition of 62. With this government, Netanyahu could better implement his domestic policies, as Yesh Atid and Jewish Home see domestic Israeli issues in a common light, but this coalition would be weak against standing up to international pressure regarding the peace process. So this government could result in an international economic boycott against Israel for failing to negotiate with the Palestinians. A third possibility is a left-wing government. This government would consist of Likud B'Teinu joining Yesh Atid, There's a Future, headed by former Israeli journalist Yair Lapid, and the socio-economic party of labor, headed by its new leader, Shelly Yakimovich, the movement, headed by Zippy Livni, and Kedima, the party headed by Shaul Mofaz. This would give Netanyahu a coalition of 73. This would be his strongest government against international pressure regarding the peace process, as all those in his coalition would be in favor of a two-state solution and would like to see a peace agreement with the Palestinians. It would also be a government which could implement Netanyahu's domestic policies. However, labor leader Shelly Yakimovich doesn't want to be in government with Netanyahu. She also would have an interest in wanting to topple Netanyahu's government so that she could possibly be prime minister. With a left-wing government, Netanyahu runs the greatest risk of losing his own political power. Nevertheless, Netanyahu has already started the process to initiate coalition talks. So based upon the election results, which roughly split the right and left parties in Israel 50-50, I believe that Israel is at a historical crossroads where it is being put in a position where it must choose between secular Zionism or national religious Zionism. Secular Zionism wants to draft yeshiva students. Secular Zionism wants to embrace the two-state solution, see the establishment of a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, because it sees that the future strength of Israel is having a Jewish state with a democratic Jewish majority that can govern its own affairs. However, this position rejects holding on to Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank, which is a part of the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Thus, the political view of secular Zionism regarding the peace process is a rejection of the covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Contrary to this is the nationalistic religious Zionism view. This view does not want to see a Palestinian state in the West Bank, biblically called Judea, Samaria. And it wants to see Israel governed, at least religiously, by the policies teachings and guidelines that has been set up by the rabbis as represented by the ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel. Secular Zionism is willing to establish and make the old city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount an international zone. Nationalistic or religious Zionism would prefer to see the rebuilding of the third temple on the Temple Mount. I believe Ezekiel 37 prophesies of the playout of first the birth and the establishment of secular Zionism in Israel, which came about from the birth of the nation in 1948. As the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, declared the independence of the State of Israel on May the 14th, 1948, in acceptance of the November 29th, 1947 United Nations General Assembly vote, where they voted for a two-state solution, an Arab state, a Jewish state, and make Jerusalem an international city. Following the June 1967 war, where Israel recaptured the West Bank along with the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights, Israel agreed through the Oslo Accords, which was signed with the Palestinians on September the 13th, 1993. It was based upon recognition of and the implementation of UN Resolutions 242 and 338. UN Resolution 242 was passed following the 1967 war, and UN Resolution 338 was passed after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. These two resolutions called for Israel to withdraw from the West Bank in exchange for a promise of security. So in effect, the birth and the establishment of the modern-day State of Israel in 1948 came about by agreeing to a vote of the United Nations in November 29, 1947, or you may view it as making a covenant with the United Nations. In agreeing to the Oslo Accords of September 13, 1993, Israel again agreed to negotiate a peace agreement with the Palestinians based upon UN resolutions, or making an agreement once again with the nations. When the God of Israel brought his people out of Egypt, he instructed that when they go into the land, they're not to make a covenant with the nations in the land, that it will be a snare and a trap to them. Well, now, over 65 years later, the nations of the world want to implement a two-state solution. They want to see the State of Israel living alongside a Palestinian state in dividing Jerusalem. Because of technology and the advancement of modern weaponry, a two-state solution based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital is a threat to the existence of Israel because of Israel's security concerns that at the closest point of the 67 borders, there's only 9 miles between there and the Mediterranean Sea. Israel could easily be split in two and thus threaten its existence as a nation. So going back to Ezekiel in chapter 37, we see in the prophecy where the dry bones come to life and return to the land of Israel that it's in two parts. The first part of the prophecy is where the dry bones come to life, but they only have flesh and bone. Spirit is not in them. I believe we've witnessed this part of the prophecy from the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. In this flesh and bone, but no spirit application, is those who are advocating a flesh and bone only or a secular Zionist Israeli future. But the second part of the prophecy in Ezekiel 37 is when breath or life comes into the bones who stood upon their feet and became a large number of people. This breath or the life is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit of God. This outpouring of His Spirit will be associated with the setting up of biblical Zionism, where Messiah, even Yeshua HaMashiach, will back His covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and establish Zion. So which government will Netanyahu choose? In the next several weeks, we should begin to know the answer to that question. So, until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.